Folks, welcome to Education Matters. Another episode this week. This week's topic is the Bedford survey. I'm sure you've read about it in the Union Leader, other places, on Facebook, on websites. But today we have a special guest. If you could introduce yourself, Anne Marie.
Well, my name is Anne Marie Banfield. I'm a resident of Bedford. I'm also pretty active in Education Matters, hence the name of the show. I do some volunteer work for Cornerstone. But this has hit me a little personal because I am a resident. I'm a taxpayer of Bedford, although I do not have kids in the school system. I've been in contact with many parents in Bedford and regarding the survey, which you've been reading about in the newspaper.
Okay, now the survey. I'm going to take a chance here and play that Fox 25 clip of the interview that Fox 25 had with the superintendent, and we'll just watch that. That kind of sums up a lot of the information.
Sex and drug use show up in a survey of middle schoolers. Some parents say that questionnaire given to kids at their school in Bedford, New Hampshire was way out of line. I'd like to know what Jim Polito says. You actually went up there. You have reaction from the kids and the parents and the superintendent.
I did. I went up to Bedford. Here's what happened. The survey, and here it is right here, profiles of student life, attitudes, and behavior. It was administered to middle school students last week. It's been done before. Here's the problem. Parents could have opted out of this, had their child not take this survey. It asks them about high-risk behavior. But as you can see there on your screen, some of the questions are very adult. How would you identify your gender? Male, female, transgender. Are you gay, lesbian, not sure, heterosexual? And a letter went out to parents letting them know that this survey would be taken, but the letter doesn't say anything about sex questions, just mentions drug and alcohol. Parents found out when the kids came home and they had questions. Here's what they said to me.
I don't want my kid having to think about a lot of these questions and being forced to, at least in her own mind, come up with answers to them when she's not even ready to discuss that yet.
I know he knows somewhat, that it has to do with sex, but to what, it's just beyond his scope, and it doesn't need to be discussed. And I retain that right as a parent to have that conversation with him, not the school.
Now, that's the superintendent. I met with him, and he said, Jim, it was just an oversight that we didn't include the word sex in the letter that went out to parents.
That's a pretty big oversight,
That's a pretty big oversight. Now, I will also tell you this morning, the only way you could see this survey was to go to the school and ask for it. When I went to the school and look at it, you couldn't take it home. When I went and asked for it, they released it, and now the parents can get copies of it. I'm not taking credit for that, but as you know, in New Hampshire, they're a little different than us. Their freedom of information is called right to know.
Yep.
Parents had to file right to know documents to get this. Now that's the outrage. The superintendent says next year, the letter will say that it asks sex questions, and if you want as a parent, you can say, I don't want Johnny to take this survey. Again, middle schoolers, 7th and 8th graders.
Right, and that's why we bring in Frank Santora. He is a retired principal in many places, many districts, including Quincy. And you're an education expert. 11 years old, too young?
Too young.
Wow.
Yeah,
See,
too young.
there it is
now,
right
it's not
there.
just me and the parents.
But I also have to add, what followed, what was before? I mean, was this taken in homeroom for a 10-minute here? Was there any pre-discussion about some of the issues? Was there post-discussions about the issues? Not just with the kids, but with the parents as well. Yeah. Because you're in a partnership with whatever happens. What was the purpose? Did it have something to do with the curriculum? Have they changed the curriculum because of the former results?
Right.
I think this survey is much more than just decision making.
Interesting. All right. So what do you say to that,
Jim? The superintendent told me that they use the results of the survey, and it asks a range of questions. Do you cut yourself? Do you hurt yourself? Are you being abused at home? And he says that they use them anonymously to tailor programs and curriculum to address issues. If they find out that a lot of kids, he said, for example, a lot of kids are using alcohol, they may have a big push in the school for alcohol awareness. That's how he said the information is used.
Well, do you agree with that,
Well,
Frank?
I briefly looked at the company and the reasons for the survey, and I think they go into a little more detail. My problem is why do they sign it? if they're using it for reasons to change curriculum, et cetera, what's the reason for the signature?
Yeah.
If I'm a parent, I'm a little upset that my 11-year-old's answering questions pertaining to those topics, because that survey goes a little deeper. It talks about support from you and your family. It talks about boundaries. It talks about social skills. It judges your use of time, self-identity, and then it puts you in categories. You're either challenged, you're vulnerable, you're adequate, or you are thriving. Why do you want to know about my kid in those categories rather than a group?
I agree. And you know what I want to say? This letter, Jim.
Go
Can I
ahead.
see this letter?
Yes, certainly. It does
I'm
not
a mother
say
of
it.
2 kids, and one is in the middle school and one is in the high school. And if I got this letter, I got to tell you, I get a big pile. I got bills, I've got letters, and I'll look at that and I'll say, we'll be conducting an important survey on the needs and attitudes and behaviors of kids. Okay, that sounds fine to me. They'll be given a full class period to complete the survey. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. There's no, I'm telling you, that's what we all do. Nobody goes through this stuff. If you do, you're a better parent than I am, but with a fine-tooth comb. But I'll tell you, if they were up front and said exactly what it was, I'm opting out of that.
And you should opt out with a signature.
Right. It simply says the name is actions in regards to high-risk behaviors such as drug and alcohol use. And my question for the superintendent, and I give him credit, he did finally meet with me when I showed up at the office, is that he said next time we'll put we'll put that it will address the issue of sex.
But you still say they shouldn't be asking these questions.
I even have questions about high school kids answering those questions myself.
Wow.
But I think the intent of the survey, the purpose, is it school functional? What did they do with last year's results? Did they change it?
It was
anything?
4 years ago, Frank. They said every 4 years this is how they're going to.
What do they do with it?
And you have the right to know as a parent what they did.
I wish you were my principal. But I'm way too old for that. I know you're retired, and I'm way too old for those days. This is Frank Santoro, retired Quincy principal. And of course.
All right, folks, thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. We do want to mention that if you go to fox25.com and maybe you can participate in their social media. At the end of the video, they ask for your comments, and that might be a nice thing to do, and let the public know what you think about this. And we'd like to know what Anne Marie thinks about this, since you're involved with this.
Right. So I was involved from, I think, the very beginning. I'm actually one of the people who filed the right to know request. And that's because I had parents contact me, and they said, that we've got this letter, and they're going to be surveying the kids. What do you think about it? And I said, well, let me look at the survey, and we'll kind of sit down and look at it and see what we think. And so I did. I asked for the survey, and I was first told that I had to go into the school to look at it. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. If you're going to survey kids, why wouldn't you make it easy for the parents to read the survey? And so then I said, well, okay. And then I filed a right to know request, because under law you can get this information. And you have a local radio show host also in Manchester who was doing the same thing, because he had gotten information on the survey too. And we happened to know each other. So he was filing a 91A request, and I did. And what was sent to us was a 58-question survey. And this was sent to us because this is what was going to be given to the elementary students. And as you go through the survey, and I have it here, it's, for me, I'm looking at this going, I'm not sure why we're even asking these questions, but they're not controversial questions. I like myself. I say no to things that are dangerous or bad for me. I enjoy reading or being read to. If school wants to know this information and parents look at it and they say, okay, I don't mind this information being known about my child, and they sign off, then so be it. I didn't really think too much about that. But I did mention in an email back to the curriculum superintendent that I had concerns about surveys. And because what you could see from the Fox interview, that this is not the survey that kind of blew up in Bedford. So what happened was, after the survey was actually given to middle school students, because I didn't realize that there were different ages, different surveys. I had asked for the survey, I got this survey back. I didn't realize that there were other surveys for other kids. That was left out of the email exchanges. And so that gets you to think, why didn't they say, which survey do you want? Are you sure you just want this survey because there's other surveys? No, they just sent me the one. And, maybe I should have asked for, more detailed questions.
I don't know what to ask sometimes,
But you would think that someone along the way would have said, that there were multiple surveys. So
Right.
that wasn't done. So then I get a call from some parents and I get a call from some students who actually took the survey, and they began telling me what they had taken on this kind of test. Questions like, have you ever sniffed glue? And I'm not going to say why you would do that, because in case you have kids watching, I don't want to explain why, but I'm sure the parents know. And I thought, oh my goodness, they're asking these kids in 7th and 8th grade that may know nothing about this, who are now just learning based on what the school is surveying them on. There were questions, personal questions about their family. Are you being hit at home? Things like that. And other questions, they on the Fox interview, they brought up the fact that they were asking them questions about, if they were participating in sexual activity, but they weren't asking in a way that, were you doing this? They were asking in a way that you are doing it. Like, when you're having sex, are you using protection? So it wasn't even a question of, are you doing it? They're just making an assumption that you are in 7th and 8th grade. So even the way the questions were asked were bothersome. There was a question on binging and purging. And I kept thinking, well, that's great. Now if you have girls who are not doing it, now you've got, who might have some body image issues, now you're putting these thoughts into their mind. So the way the questions were asked were very bothersome. As someone who researches education, I have looked at some of these, these surveys and some of these programs, and I've seen the harmful effects. And yes, there can be harmful effects from some of the programs that are in your schools, and I'll give you an example. In Columbine, many people are familiar with what happened in Columbine when the students went in and they shot up their classmates several years ago. There was a 2020 program, and you can look and you can Google it on the internet. And 2020 did a show on the programs that were in the school. And one of the programs that were in the school, and they were in different schools too besides Columbine, it was called Death Education.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a way to help students who might be dealing with death in their lives. And it's a serious issue, and it's an issue that everybody, I'm sure, has, it pulls at your heartstring. If a child loses somebody in their family, that's tough to deal with. And I think these schools understand that, but they're trying to deal with an issue that, is probably beyond their scope. So in the interview and in the program of the 2020, if you Google 2020 Columbine Death Education, you can bring up and you can watch the whole video. And at the end of the show, they show these kids going in, and they're going into morgues. They're looking at dead bodies. You can see the kids cringing. They're writing what they want on their tombstone. So they're getting them to really focus on death as a way to help them. But it was interesting, at the end of the show, they show one of the girls from Columbine saying that, as they're talking about death and they're talking about suicide, she's thinking about committing suicide. And she almost does it. And so these programs, while they're trying to help your kids, are actually sometimes having the opposite effect on them.
They're actually validating the behavior
Exactly.
in some subliminal way.
Yes, by putting those thoughts into their minds. So at the end, she brings up how she, wanted to commit suicide. And, I've researched this, and some of the former school board members in Columbine have said that they blame that death education class as a component as far as what happened with those other students that shut it up. So there could be some really serious consequences to putting those kind of thoughts into a child's mind when you don't know what you're dealing with. So when I first saw the survey, the actual survey that was given to the middle schoolers, I became very concerned. And I brought this information to the school board at the last school board meeting, and I brought this to their attention thinking, do you realize that you may be trying to help? I don't want to judge what they're trying to do, because I sense that they're trying to help kids. But at the same time, you could be having this negative consequence that in some cases have been shown to be deadly. The DARE program that we're all familiar with, that there were studies that showed that was ineffective. We spent a lot of money on the DARE program. There's studies that showed that was ineffective. Some parents said, by making them curious about alcohol, my kids, turned to alcohol after the DARE program. So there's, these are things that I don't think people always connect, always think about, that there can be some damaging consequences. So, some of the parents, needless to say, are very upset in Bedford. Some of them filed complaints at the Department of Education the New Hampshire Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Education. There's a law on the books from the Federal Department of Education that says that parents have to consent, that they have to consent to this. And I wrote to the curriculum superintendent, and I said, how did you follow the law by not getting the parental consent? Because what they did is they sent it is an email to parents that the survey was going to be given, and they showed it on Fox that they really didn't give the full amount of information with the kind of questions that were going to be asked.
I wonder if that was purposeful. Was it deceptive, or
well, those are the
not
words I'm
be
hearing.
clearly transparent about the questions on the survey, whether they were going to be sexual nature, and they were going to be questions probing their family life and parental behaviors. I mean, those were not.
That was not disclosed.
Disclosed.
Right.
So, but those are questions on the survey.
Right.
Particularly one of them about.
Yeah, there was one question about do you have guns and knives in the homes? Things like that. And this is concerning. I can remember years ago the pediatrician asking my son at the pediatrician's office years ago this question. I thought, I'd rather my son, who is a little kid, not be asked those kind of questions. And so here we have this on the survey, and parents did not know that those are the kinds of questions that were going to be asked.
Yeah.
And so, was it purposefully deceptive? I don't know if it was a purposeful. But this is the kind of reaction that I'm hearing from parents. I'm hearing from parents that, I talked to one that used the term incompetent and deceptive. And I don't know the true nature of the individuals who made this decision. You want to think the best about people, but when you have this laid out the way it was instituted in the school, I think that it's getting parents to wonder. And we have a law in place. The law says that if you're going to ask these kind of questions of students, that you need to get parental permission. It says written parental permission. And I asked our curriculum superintendent about that, and he said, well, if you're requiring them to take the survey, and in his opinion, they didn't require them because there was this opt-out kind of provision. Well, the kids that I'm talking to and the parents that I'm talking to, the kids went into the school. Many parents didn't even know the survey was being done. Again, this was sent to them through an email. They didn't know about it. Then you're requiring parents to go in and actually look at the survey. The mail, as they showed on Fox News, didn't really get into the heart of what was going to be asked. So, these kids sit down, they're given a survey, and they're told, you have to do this survey unless your parent opted you out. So these kids are thinking this is required. I take tests, and if I don't take a test, I'm going to lose my grades. These are the things that are going through their head.
They don't have the same thought process as an adult would have. You can't think that they're going to go through it the same way and know about their rights to privacy and how to protect their right to privacy. They have no idea.
Right. There's something called the Fifth Amendment where you don't have to incriminate yourself. Nobody explains the Fifth Amendment when they go through these surveys.
The student is not only incriminating himself, but he's also incriminating the parent.
Yes.
When they're asking the parents about what they're doing in the home. For instance, I just circled a couple here. Which of the following describes your family? And there's, who do you live with? And, what business is it, really?
Yeah.
And another one's, my parents often tell me they love me. Well, sometimes students, they don't always get along well with their parents. So what are they going to put there?
Yeah.
Right? No, my parent hates me. Right?
If they just got into a fight. There's times where, if I'm telling my kids to clean up the room and they're arguing with me and they stomp off, that, who knows how they would answer it that day.
Right. There's other questions, too, specifically about the parents and the parents' behavior.
Yeah.
That your child at 12 years old is evaluating you.
Yes.
In their own opinion.
Yes.
And now these questions are being aggregated together somehow and used in programs. What was that one? The Stand By Me, was it?
Yeah. That's what they. That's one of the programs that they do in Bedford. I'm not really familiar with it. I've had a couple parents that. I understand a lot of parent involvement is with that program, and so that would probably be a good thing, knowing that the parents are involved. But again, I'm also concerned when I look back and I realize that you look at the death education, and you had a lot of good people who really wanted to make a difference in that school, and then you just actually had something that was really destructive and really harmful. And so it's something that may look good, something that may sound good, something that, I asked a psychologist, a medical professional, to go through this questionnaire. I asked him yesterday, and he was in shock. And he said in his own facility, they do not ask those kind of questions. And he's concerned that...
There's a liability issue.
Yes.
Is there not a liability issue here?
Well, I think there is going to be a liability issue, especially in Bedford, because of the fact that they failed to get parental consent. And according to that law...
Yeah, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment.
Right. According to
PPRA.
Yes, according to that law, that they need to have the consent of parents.
That's a U.S. law, 20 U.S.C. 12328H 34 CFR Part 98.
Yeah, I think if you just Google the
PPRA.
PPRA,
Okay.
you'll bring it up, and you need to look at that. If they're asking specific questions of your child, they need to be giving you notification. They need to let you know what's going on, and they need your written permission. And there could be a question about whether the survey is required or not. That's what our superintendent had told me. Curriculum superintendent told me that because this wasn't a required survey, they did not, I guess, require parental consent. Now, I can tell you that the Rutherford Institute is one of these organizations that take on parental consents, take on parental lawsuits in situations like this, and they have in other school districts where this has been a problem, and they're saying that they need written consent. So there's a little bit of a difference of opinion here, but the bottom line is, what? We've opened ourselves up to a lawsuit in Bedford. If a parent wants to pursue this, according to some of the parents, their kids sat down and were under the impression that they had to take this survey, that it wasn't made clear to them that they did not have to take this survey.
Not all students would know. Did my mother sign something? Did my mother do the opt-in or opt-out? They probably wouldn't know at times. So where do we go from here? I mean,
well, I can tell you in Bedford what we're doing is I had gone before the school board and I asked them to first of all implement a policy, and I think that every school district should have a policy on these kind of surveys. You can see that you can get in trouble as a school district, you can become angry as a parent. Why not avoid it by putting in a policy? Number one, that this information should be put on the website. Everybody should be able to go to this survey, and it is now on the Bedford website, which is really interesting. You can go to the Bedford website and go look at the survey and look at the questions yourself. So this should be on the website so everybody could see. And then, second of all, that parents have enough time to do this, and that they have to give their written permission. I would even go so far as to say that the teachers should really explain to the kids their Fifth Amendment rights. And another suggestion would be that all surveys are approved by the school board. Let the school board look at these surveys.
They kind of rubber stamp them. They probably asked, okay, sign this. We're going to have these surveys. Okay, and they sign.
And if
or
they
they
do,
vote. They vote. The vote majority.
If they do,
and they
then
don't
they
even
should
look
be
at them.
accountable. They should be accountable. These are our people's representatives. But this was not our school board was not aware of this survey. They were not aware of these kinds of questions.
It comes to them as probably a general question to vote on.
I don't even know if it came to them. I don't even know
all?
I don't even know if it came to them. I don't think it did.
Surveys in general.
Well, they need to look close, because I can tell you this is really kind of blowing up in Bedford.
Well, it's not only Bedford.
Yeah.
There's other school districts using these same surveys.
Yeah.
So is Manchester using it? I tried to find that out today, and I wasn't successful. But parents just need to call the school, and ask, is Manchester using these same surveys? The name of the company
is the Search Institute, yes.
Search Institute, Attitudes and Behaviors. That is for the 7th and 8th graders, and perhaps high school students.
Yeah, for the younger kids, it was called the Developmental Assets Profile. And, this is something that, again, I don't want to question the reasons, because I think people always have good reasons, but they don't always understand the consequences. So get involved. Develop a policy. If you don't have a policy, look at your current policy. Make sure that a policy is in place, that there's written consent, transparency. Those are really the priorities there. And then you're going to avoid. Hopefully you'll avoid parents getting angry and upset. I mean, I had one parent who was in tears, and she was, talking about, that, her, after she read it, she when her son came home, she was like, I thought it was bad, but then when I read it, she was like, I was just devastated.
Well, to put your student or your child through this exercise, and if it's not appropriate, then they should just be not allowed.
Right.
Okay? And it was supposed to be anonymous, but yet, as you saw in the video, folks, that there are fields placed on the front of the form for the child to put his student ID number.
Right, right. And some of the students, I believe, did.
And so if they did, the teacher picks it up and sees, it's a little bit about that family, a little bit about that student, that now maybe she can be prejudiced about to that student. You just never know. So it wasn't anonymous per se.
No. Well, and I think even if you leave everything off, if you look at the first few questions, a lot of times you can identify a student based on the questions that they've answered. So this notion that these things are anonymous is not necessarily true. There's a question, have you ever tried to kill yourself? I mean, there's suicide questions on here. So if you have one student in the class who has, and they say yes and everybody else says no, guess what? That student's been identified. So this idea that this is all anonymous, it's not anonymous.
And also I was thinking while I was going through some of these emails and such, that this information, it's a community revelation of what is going on in your community. And if these programs that are in the community are going to influence how they develop other programs in the community, you're not just talking about students, you're talking about adults and manipulating the entire society.
Well, and just to kind of wrap everything up, the students who I talked to said a lot of the kids lied. I mean, some of these are so outrageous that they took it as a joke, so they started, lying on them. So now we've got a survey. We paid over $8,000 for the survey, by the way, in Bedford. So now we've got the survey that has skewed results. Now they're telling us that the company has a way to kind of throw those questions out, but you have
plus
to
or
wonder.
minus.
Yeah, you have to wonder, plus or minus. You have to wonder, are they really able to do that? And then so now we're going to base programs on information that is skewed. And then, how's Bedford looking? Do we look like a high drug town when actually the kids are just, filling in false information?
So this information, the results are going to be put on the website?
That's what I'm being told.
Okay,
yes.
so folks, just look to Bedford's website for the results. Call your superintendent. Find out if your town has engaged in this survey, and find out if the results are going to be on, well, the questions also, but also the results are going to be placed on your website. So let's ask for transparency. I think this is what this is about. It's transparency, and it's disclosure, and it's parental informed consent.
Yes.
And following the law.
Yep.
Is that how we can sum it up?
Right.
Okay. Well, folks, I think we're at the end of the show, and please, folks, get involved with your child's school, your child, and that's all we can ask, right?
Make the schools better.
Make the schools better in any way you can. All right, John, I think we're finished for today. Thank you so much, folks. We'll see you next week. Take care.